At Heart Developments, we like to quote to your must-have requirements. Assuming your budget is not unlimited, we like to quote to your must-have requirements. To get to your must-have requirements, we use a methodology called MOSCO. MOSCO stands for must-have, could have, should have, and won't have. A must-have requirement is a requirement which must be costed. These are things which, in essence, you need to pay for the functionality of what you want to achieve. So for example, it could be that you would just like the shell of your extension built, and so you would only like our quote to focus on these costs at this stage. A must-have could also be the bifold doors that you would require. This could be the whole reason that you want to build the extension in the first place, because you want to open up your garden. A should-have requirement is something which you would like. Sometimes this is referred to as nice to have, but actually they could significantly ramp the costs, and it isn't something which you would mind changing. A could-have is very similar to a should-have. A could-have is something that basically is also a nice to have, but has very little impact when left out of the project. A won't have is something which will be excluded. This is actually quite important too, because it could be that this starts off on your wish list and actually ends up completely taken off. You've decided it's no longer something that you need to have, should have, and you can exclude it completely. And again, we like to make a note of the things that we will be excluding so everybody's clear. So now you understand what MOSCO prioritization is, but how do you do it? We recommend that you go room by room of the renovation or the extension that you're going to have, all the conversion, and you really think about things at a detailed level. For example, what type of lighting do you want in this room? What type of doors do you want? Really, do you have to have the bifold doors? Would you prefer some French doors with window lights? What is it that you're trying to achieve versus what is comfortable for you to be able to afford? If we quote to your must-haves, you now know that you can get what you need, and you know it's going to be fit for purpose. It may not necessarily be everything you want, but you know that you can achieve this. It may be that you want to wait till a later time in the project and raise what we call a change request to actually now include some of those nice to haves from your list. Or it may be that you want to wait and do that in another year or later that year. It's entirely down to you. The main thing is that you know from an affordability perspective that everything that's been quoted for is something you must have. So how do we operate the change request process? The change request process is dealt with in exactly the same way as the quote process. You have your requirement, you now have a start date for your project, so you know when we're arriving and you know the work that we're going to do based on your must-haves. But you'd actually now like to build in a change. You've decided, perhaps you've been waiting 6 months for the project to start, you might have some more funds available and you'd like to build them in. So you simply ask us for that information, we provide you with the quote. On approval of the quote, we then put that into the project timeline and proceed as normal. However, if we begin this process and we have all the must-haves and all the nice-to-haves together, the assumption may be that it's simple for us to just remove elements of the quote. And unfortunately, this is not the case. The reason is covered more in how we produce our quotes, but to summarise this, our quotes are produced in the best, most efficient way in terms of the way that we use our labour. So sometimes, just by removing certain items does not necessarily mean there is a huge movement on the plan. For example, we may have a couple of teams working in parallel which don't cause a health and safety risk. And so sometimes if we remove some of that, there might be a slight reduction. It might not necessarily be what you're expecting. So we always like to start with what are the must-haves. If we wait until a quote is perfect and it has everything that you want and we do revision upon revision of the quote, what we could find is that because this does take quite some time, material suppliers may put their costs up. So all the time that we've been spending on chopping and changing requirements can actually be harmful to the process. There could also be specialist items within the quote that you've required, and we've checked the lead times on these, and we're quite confident of the timeline we provide you. But if we then stop and start trying to remove things, we're taking time to finalise that quote, and that time could be critical lead time for the specialist product, which at the beginning of the process we knew was available in X amount of months or weeks time, but now everything's changed again. It will elongate your process to put everything into the quote as a wish list. Our target is always to help you move to quote as quickly and efficiently as possible. Please understand, we can quote for everything you want, but this would have to be on the basis that your budget is in fact unlimited, because everything can be achieved. But we like to work with our clients collaboratively so that we actually get to something that they are comfortable with, they know what they're going to get, and they have time and space to decide on all those nice extras as we go along the process.